Everyone, and happy Sunday. Happy long weekend. As I mentioned in my weekly breakdown, tomorrow is actually Victoria Day. So it is a long weekend for you guys, although it doesn't really feel like that these days. It's nice to know that we have Monday off, which is kind of nice. And hopefully the weather holds up tomorrow, and we can all get outside or just hang out with our families and enjoy that time. So I hope you guys are enjoying your weekend. So as mentioned in my post in Google Classroom, I'm putting together a pretty lengthy video here for you guys to explain what we're going to be working on this week. We're going to be jumping into some content that is actually pretty important content if you are going on to university next semester, because if you're taking any kind of social science course, psych course, anthro course, or business course, which most of you will be, because even science majors typically take psych courses in their first year, you actually will run into this content. So this is really important and a little bit more challenging as well. So that's why I'm going to spend a little bit more time right now going through this information in video form or in lesson form. So while this video is longer, please listen to it all. Assume this is our lesson for the week and that we're in class together. Okay, so here is the lesson. It's been hyperlinked into our weekly breakdown, and of course, as always, has been posted in Google Classroom. There is inquiry work to do along with the lesson. So this is just a guided question. You've each received a copy of this document. You can go right into the document and answer the questions and then submit that. It's really important that you do this inquiry work as you go through this lesson, because it's going to help you understand Hofstede's model. That's going to help you with the case study that we're going to be working on this week, okay? So must go through this first before you get into the case, and that's obviously going to be the emphasis on what we're going to be working on this week. So Hofstede's model of cultural dimensions is a very important model that we use in business, especially today, because as we know, business is internationally based, and this pandemic itself has highlighted just how interconnected we are and how much in this world, what happens in another area of the world, even if it's on the opposite side of the world, actually has massive implications for what happens here in Canada. So Hofstede's cultural dimensions model for cultural understanding and international business practices is really applicable and a really important sort of in size and scope in terms of understanding and comprehending. What I'm going to ask you guys to do is open up this lesson and go through each slide very methodically, really take time to look at all of the information that has been provided to you. I want you to start by watching this TED Talk. It's about 15 minutes. And it actually has a lot of really great information and just gives you a sort of a different perspective on how we need to approach, both travel and international travel, as well as international business practices cross-culturally. So watch that first. Then we get into the content. So our focus on this lesson is going to be on Hofstede's cultural dimensions. So Gerd Hofstede was a Dutch anthropologist, and he basically what he did as his entire sort of thesis of work was to analyze. He analyzed cultural differences, and he created a model, which was basically a guideline for how to engage in business practices in other countries and do so respectfully. So it's actually really interesting. But the idea behind this is that if we can really understand intimately what those cultural differences and nuances are, that when we go and engage in some kind of international business practice, trade, relationship, negotiation practice, marketing practice, or what have you, if we use this information, then we're going to actually see better results, because what we're going to do is consider the cultural implications of what we're doing. So for example, if we use red and white in our marketing campaign, is that actually going to negatively stereotype or have some sort of negative connotation in the culture in which we are marketing our product? And what do we have to change if we decide we're going to go to Japan as an example? What do we need to change from what we're doing here in Canada to what we need to do in Japan with our product? Even though we're successful here, it doesn't mean that we can do and replicate the same things in another country. Okay, so that's kind of the idea behind his model of understanding. So Gerd Hofstede actually had 6 different cultural dimensions, and we're mostly going to be focusing on 4 within this lesson, but it's important to understand that there are 6 differences. And a lot of these are fairly intuitive, or you just know naturally because you've done projects on other countries in your past high school career. But still, it's an important thing for you to really look through. So again, I'm not going to go through each of these slides in detail because the expectation is that you do that yourself, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a preamble so that you understand what you're diving into. So within this lesson, I have broken down each of these dimensions, and the first four with a little bit more detail and with some more examples. So let's take power distance as our first dimension as an example. Okay, so power distance, or PDI, really just is a measure of the difference in power between people, or how we perceive power within a culture. Okay, so for example, in cultures where some people are considered superior because of social status or gender, as an example, we know there are many cultures in the world where the man is still considered to be more powerful and influence than the female, even though here in Canada, we're slowly trying to break down that gender stereotype, and we're slowly trying to break down that glass ceiling. We know that that still even exists subconsciously, if not implicitly. But in other cultures, that's not something that exists. It's just the man is the more powerful gender. This is something that we covered in one of our lessons last week, this idea of, do we look at, cultural imperialism? Do we try to, understand our cultural relativism? We try to look at a culture from our framework, from our lens. That's not always the best way to look at it if you're trying to engage in a business negotiation and you want to seal the deal. You know what I mean? So even though we may not agree with that, approach to the culture, it's still something that we need to respect and try to understand and appreciate as a cultural difference if we intend on engaging in business practices with them. Okay, so cultures that tend to assume more of equality among people and focus more on sort of an earned status than a perceived social status at birth. So for example, boys are considered more influential than women, using that example that we were just referring to, from Hofstede's model, have a lower power distance. So they look at each other and they relate to each other more as equals, as it compares to a culture that might not. They have a higher power distance. So if you look at the next slide, I've broken this down even more for you. So lower power distance countries or cultures, their different characteristics typically include this idea that inequality among genders should be minimized, or genders, I should say, but also race, culture, etc. Okay, that all people should be independent of one another, that there is hierarchy is in inequality of the role. So it's really only for convenience only that we have a hierarchy, if you will, but really the country or the culture is based around, earned status as opposed to just given status, if that makes sense. Okay. So I've broken down for you here examples of what low power distance cultures would have versus high power distance cultures. And then on the next slide, I've actually given you numbers and data to show you the examples. So here's your country and here is your PDI, so your power distance. So if you have a lower power distance, this means, as you know, that the country itself really works around this idea of interdependence of people, earned status, equality, things like that. So you're going to see countries with lower power distance, to be more akin to Canada, as an example. As you can see on this list, Canada is about 8 or so down. Their PDI is about 39, okay? On the flip end of this, high power distance cultures, so Slovakia, Malaysia, Panama, Philippines, Russia, China, these might be countries who, have different types of government systems. For example, with regards to China, while they are trying to work towards a democracy, they are more based around a communist model, this type of thing. Same with Russia, right? So you'll start to see some parallels in why some countries are higher power distance than others. Now, it's not really about that. It's more just about, well, I'm going to be engaging in a business negotiation or a business transaction. So I'm a country, I'm a person who started a business in Canada, and I want to now engage in a business transaction or business relationship, opening up my negotiations to, let's say, Japan. I really have to understand, well, how is that negotiation and that transaction going to look like? How do I have to change what is normal in my country and my expectations around what might be different in their country? Okay? So that's really what this model is all about. Now, I'm not going to go through each and every slide because I think that probably helps you understand a little bit better what you're looking at when you look at this particular lesson. But your expectation is to go through each of these slides. So dimension 2 breaks down uncertainty avoidance. and then again, gives you an example of what it is, gives you examples of what a low uncertainty avoidance looks like, a high uncertainty avoidance culture, and then gives you the numbers to look at, well, what countries are on the lower end and what countries are more on the higher end, okay? So as you can see, it's really important that you go through this lesson with a fine-tooth comb and complete the inquiry work. That's really important as well, so that you are prepared to do the actual assignment for this week, which is the negotiations case study. So this case study is about a company in Canada called Canada Timber, and they are going to be extending their business into Japan. Now, if you read as you read through the case study, you'll see that they actually do have suppliers and in other countries, but this is a really great business opportunity for them to expand their business dealings in Japan. Japanese culture is one of Canada's #1 trading partners. We know that internationally it has a lot of power in terms of trade. So this is one of those countries that if you were to able to secure a business contract with, this is going to be really, really good for you. Okay. So your job is to take the information from the Hofstede model and read the case study really thoroughly, get an understanding of the people that are involved, and highlight and go through the case and try to figure out, well, where is this owner of Canadian Timber, where is this person going wrong in this transaction? Okay, there are things that they do right and there are things that they do wrong. And your job is to really look at Hofstede's model and try to think, okay, this individual, his name is Tim, who's the owner of Canadian Timber, is trying to secure this business deal with this company out in Japan. And he's in charge of this entire negotiation with the help of his advisors. But where did this person go wrong, or this team go wrong? What did they not apply properly from what you have learned from Hofstede's model? Okay, so your expectations for this case, just go through the whole thing. Obviously, it's pretty long, so welcome to higher level learning. Read through the case, and then you're going to create a case report. Okay, so the report is going to have a title page. You're going to break your answers down into different headings, and then you're going to have a bibliography for any outside research that you may include. Okay, so case questions include, based on Hofstede's model, analyze where Japan falls as it pertains to power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism and collectivism, and masculinity versus femininity. So you're going to take all of the stuff that you learned from the lesson, and you're going to tell me, based on what your research tells you, where does Japan fall within these 4 rounds of Hofstede's model? Okay. Now, once you do that analysis, you're going to answer question 2, using the United States as a basis of comparison, and then also doing some outside research from our lesson. Analyze where you believe Canada falls in these 4 aspects. So essentially what you're doing is a compare and contrast between Japan and Canada on these 4 aspects of Hofstede's model. Okay. Now that you've done your analysis of both countries as to where they lie cross-culturally in terms of norms and expectations, I want you to tell me, where do Japan and Canada differ from your analysis as it relates to this model, as it pertains to their social and business practices cross-culturally? Again, you may have to do some outside research, and any outside research that you do, just include that in your bibliography and use obviously proper embedded citations to support where you take that information from. Okay, now using this research and analysis above, I want you to evaluate Tim's negotiation process and the negotiation process that was taken by Canadian Timber. Do you think any mistakes were made? If so, what and why? Be very specific. And then, of course, tie this into question 5. What could and should have been done differently by Canadian Timber in order to produce a more desirable outcome? Okay, so you're going to take these 5 sections and divide them into different headings. Okay, so it's different sections of your report and answer them. And you're more than welcome to create a chart for the first 2 questions, because you're going to be kind of analyzing these 4 different aspects of Hofstede's model and then lumping in what you have found from data from Japan versus Canada. So you can do that in chart form, that's fine. Just make sure that you are citing research that you take from outside or outside research. And then the rest I would obviously expect that you're really writing what you think, okay? So it is a case form, so just include a title page on page 1, divide your questions into different sections, so there'll be 5 different sections, and then include a bibliography for any outside research, okay? So this is probably one of, I think, well, this is outside of one more project. This is like one of your last projects of the course. So you've been given a full week to complete this. So while it has been assigned to you this week, you actually have until next Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. to complete this. So you've got lots of time. And really, this is your only task for the week outside of the inquiry work. But if you have any questions, let me know. I know this is a lengthy video. It's really important that you do obviously go through it because I think that I'm explaining everything pretty well. But if you have any further questions or if you want me to look over your work and double check that you're on the right track, I'm happy to do that as well. Okay. So I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that you are hanging in there and have a great week, and I will see you